Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. We're continuing through the book and we come to the story of one of my favorite people. Peter is constantly saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, making quick, rash decisions that don't often pan out well. And yet he is Jesus' right-hand guy and ends up being like the leader of the church when it gets started. The first time we meet Peter, his name is Simon, and it's actually his brother that brings him along. I mentioned last week that Andrew is always seen bringing people to Jesus. The first one he brought was his brother. Sometime after that, because we know they've already met, Jesus is preaching along the seashore, and Simon is there with his boats because they've been fishing all night. And Jesus, to kind of get away from the crowd and get a little bit of space, he uses Simon's boat as like a platform, a stage. He gets onto the boat and preaches from there. Luke 5, starting at verse 4, tells us, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Now go out where it is deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish." "Master," Simon replied, "we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again." And this time their nets were so full of fish they began to tear. This one little story tells us a lot about Simon. For starters, he's not afraid to speak his mind. Jesus told him to do something, and his first response wasn't to do it, but to kind of explain the pointlessness of doing it. But then he goes ahead and does it anyway. So he'll speak up, but he's also obedient. That's a big part of what makes him so impactful. But they go and do it, and they catch so many fish their nets are tearing. He calls in his partners in another boat to come and help, which tells us that Peter isn't just one fisherman in a boat, but he's like leading up a team of fishing boats. Peter recognizes what happens here. He knew that there was no reason they should possibly be catching fish in this scenario, but they do. And it makes it clear to him that Jesus is special. And he kind of panics. He's like, "Lord, you need to get away from me. You're clearly holy, and I am very much not." Then you see in verse 10, Jesus replied to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. And this is a big deal. He's leading a fishing fleet. And then Jesus gives him absolute mind-blowing success and says, "Come with me instead. Instead of catching fish, I want to show you how to catch people." And Peter clearly knew what he meant, and they follow him. They leave all of this amazing success behind and go with Jesus. The next big story of Peter is also in a boat out on the sea, but it's not fishing this time. This is the one where there's a storm, they're rowing all night, and then Jesus shows up walking on the water, freaks everybody out because they think it's a ghost, until Jesus says, "Hey, don't panic, it's me." We pick up the story in Matthew 14, starting at verse 28. Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" Now, people tend to look down on Peter for that line there at the end where it's like, "Oh, you have so little faith, you doubted," and he sank. But Peter was the only one who got out of the boat and walked on the water at all. So I think he deserves some credit. And this is just another example of what I said. Do you think he really thought through this whole thing of, "I'm going to step out of the boat and walk on the water"? I think it's very obvious that he didn't, because we saw that it worked out until he paid attention, until his logical brain kicked in and he went, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense." And he saw the wind and the waves and the storm and he freaked out, and that's when he sank. But when he was just paying attention to Jesus, he was able to experience and join Jesus in the miracle. That's significant. One of Peter's most famous failures is on the night Jesus was arrested. As he and his disciples are gathered for one last meal together, Jesus tells them that somebody's about to betray him. And Peter says, "No, I will never leave your side. I would be willing to die for you." And John 13:38, Jesus answered, "Die for me? I tell you the truth, Peter. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." I don't have time to go into detail on the whole story. Sure enough, Peter does end up denying that he even knows Jesus. And he goes out and he weeps bitterly because he betrayed his closest friend and master. But that's not the end of Peter's story. Because after Jesus is resurrected, he comes back to Peter. For starters, it's noteworthy that Peter is still with the group. When they first get news of an empty tomb, Peter is the first one to run to it and run clear inside to check on this. And then later, Jesus appears to them and takes Peter aside and completely restores him, lets him know, "Yes, I know you failed, but I'm not done with you yet." And he tells him, "There's still so much I have in store for you." And Peter comes back and he follows Jesus again. And that's where he becomes what we know. He's the man who leads the church. When the day of Pentecost, he gives the first great sermon and 3,000 people are saved in one day. He's the one spearheading the movement of following Jesus and seeing lives radically transformed. It's a demonstration of what Jesus can do with a life. It doesn't matter how many times you've messed up, how publicly you've failed, how many promises you have broken, how many times you stick your foot in your mouth and say the wrong thing, or you make the dumb choices. It's like Peter's there to show us that we can't screw up hard enough to mess up God's plans for us. Jesus still used him. And the only thing that made the difference is that Peter came back to Jesus and he followed what Jesus said. One of the very first instructions Jesus gave him was follow me. And at the end, that's what he told him was continue to follow me. And that's all it took then. It's all it took for Peter. It's all it takes for us. Just follow Jesus. Let him show you the next thing to do. Listen to Jesus and do what he says, and he can use you to change the world.